Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. I put out a video yesterday where I tried to let the video clips tell the story. I did that for a reason. I wanted to get your thoughts before I gave you mine for once. The results varied in your responses, but some seemed to see what I see. Others seemed to gravitate to a team. Others focused their hostilities towards Steve G. I think Steve G at this point is a joke. I mean, he openly admits to the things that he says in interviews that they are him trying to send people on rabbit holes and they're false.
She's watching your interviews, making us all watch it together and coming up with discovery based off your conversations. And once I learned that, guess what? I started talking about Bluetooth. I started talking about other things and just put her on rabbit trails.
To lend any credibility to any of the words that come out of Steve G's mouth going forward, I believe is just a waste of time because they become more and more ridiculous as he continues to say things. But it's the sides that I see people taking that is of interest to me. It seems to me that 90% of what we refer to as the pro burger community is all in on Turvy, and the Guilter community is pitchforks for him. Then we have Sai Ray. Seems that the Guilter community is accepting Sai with open arms, and the pro burger community are pitchfork ready for Sai. The result of all of this, though, is the pro burger community is pitchfork ready for Ann Taylor. The thing that most people fail to consider, though, is both Sai Ray and Brent Turvy is calling Ann Taylor the bad guy in the scenario.
The version of Ann Taylor that I know bears no resemblance to the Ann Taylor that took the plea and is talking in public right now. I don't know this person.
Ann will absolutely fall on her sword for BK. She is a true believer. She believes he's innocent. She has an unhealthy relationship with him.
So let me ask you, if Sai is against Turvy,
Brett Turvy gets with Whitcom, who's another idiot. Like the guy who's never investigated a homicide is going to be the armchair quarterback that's going to change this thing, right? So,
and Turvy is against Sai.
You know, kind of a rogue defense expert right now going out there saying contrary things, you know.
If Sai is out to keep BK behind bars and Turvy is out to get him free, why are they both saying Ann Taylor is the villain?
Took the plea and is talking in public right now. I don't know this person.
Has an unhealthy relationship with him.
Let me give you 60 seconds to think about what I just asked, and then please put your thoughts on it in the comments below. I feel like it's important. Now, you know, I think about the things that we're currently watching in a different way than pretty much everyone else. Most people base their thoughts on things about what they're seeing happen now, which is understandable. They see Sai Ray out saying BK is guilty, but the evidence against him was gathered in a nefarious way. They see Turvy out saying BK is likely innocent and an injustice has been done. Based on this, they pick a team, and it's easy to see why, and it's easy to see which team they would pick. I, on the other hand, look at everything through the lens of time. As you know, since the surprise plea deal, I've made video after video saying the BK defense team taking the plea deal was a strategy, and for us to be patient because there will be a PCR filed like there was. And this thing will go to trial, in my opinion. The position they were put in after the Dateline leak was too much to overcome at that time. No discovery had been released. Hippler denying the continuance literally forced this strategy, in my humble opinion.
This is a huge case, huge case, huge case. And I always want to know everything, and I love a scoop. I love a scoop. I love knowing something and getting a scoop and putting it out there, you know, when it's obviously do your due diligence and verify the information. But when I watched that Dateline, I was shocked. I was flabbergasted by the amount of information that they were able to obtain, because a lot of that was obviously, it was discovery material that nobody had seen before. And it was obviously stuff that made Koberger look really guilty.
Yes.
And so he's like dressed up in those black outfits, like just like how they said, the guy going into the house with the bushy eyebrows, you know, all wearing all black and stuff. So I was like, holy smokes. And then Keith Morrison did an interview that's on YouTube and said basically that they had everything. I'm like, who gave them, like, who is handing out hard drives? Like, somebody is handing out hard drives apparently to Dateline. And I was shocked. I was like, wow, that's a lot. Because this is a case where they've already moved venue, and it just seemed like a lot of information. That, I mean, it was like a scoop on steroids, you know, like I was like, it was a lot of information.
And then, well, there was also they showed video surveillance that was never seen before.
Yeah.
You know that, and then couple that. You and I were talking. I don't know if we did it on the show. I think we did it for Law and Crime, and we were talking about. And just wait, because the Patterson book hadn't come out yet, where the cover of it, or the what do you call it, said we have basically the inside scoop on everything. Like holy cow,
we know everything. Yeah. I was like,
Cecile,
wow. I was like, okay, because when I went out there, everybody was like, we can't talk to you. I was like, what is going on? Like, what is going on here? Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you have a right to a fair trial and you have somebody leaking material like that right before trial,
damaging to the case. They have.
Now, if I'm right, and this was a defense strategy, it would have been thought out in a way to not only take advantage of everything that they could take advantage of, such as giving them additional time to go through all of the discovery, wait until all of the defense expert reports were unsealed to the public, so that once the PCR phase is over, the chance of real discussions of evidence could take place and potentially take that public opinion of 95% of people already having an opinion of guilt down at least a little. We know that did happen right before the PCR filing. At the time of the plea, nothing was being released, and the mainstream morons were free to speculate only guilty ideas, no matter how much the defense team begged for evidence to be opened up to the public.
But what we're talking about now is a public hearing when the state has decided to not give us information or to drag their feet on giving us information. We're talking about a public hearing where we have a right to be in the public eye, a public hearing. Brian's the one with the right. It's his Sixth Amendment right to have a public hearing. When the state wants to close a hearing, or any party, and the other party objects, which we do, the court is guided by case law in the state of Idaho and the backdrop of his Sixth Amendment right to a public trial in the United States Constitution and Article 1, Section 13 in the Idaho Constitution. So in the backdrop of that, the court is guided by case law.
But part of the strategy would have to be putting in place enough things that would guarantee the PCR motion actually worked. According to every expert in law, the odds against a PCR working is about 97% against. For it to be an ironclad plan, the PCR must work. To do that, they would need to set up evidence in advance that no attorney would normally do, such as record sessions of them coercing their client into a plea deal with witnesses on hand, and text messages that would all provide ironclad evidence of it.
And all the other allegations of being coerced. I mean, he's not going to make that allegation unless he has the evidence. And if she's communicating with him over text messages, well, guess what?
Right.
But for this to all truly work, it would literally be a game of 4D chess. And in that game, everybody is going to be in the know who is playing this game of chess. That includes the defense attorney, Ann Taylor, Brian Koberger and his family, Brent Turvy, Sai Ray, as I will explain shortly, and even the accomplice, Christopher Whitcomb, would have been in the know as this game of chess was being put into play. When did Whitcomb get involved again?
I decided to write this book shortly before the change of plea hearing. That it was set for trial.
For those of you that don't remember, the plea deal was disclosed to the public on June 30th, 2025. It was said that the talks on that plea deal started just a couple of days prior to it being announced to the public. The formal plea hearing took place on July 2nd, 2025, just a couple of days later. Now, what did Whitcomb just say?
I decided to write this book shortly before the change of plea hearing. That it was set for trial.
So if Whitcomb decided to write the book shortly before the change of plea hearing on July 2nd, 2025, and it wasn't even announced to the public until 2 days prior, it's pretty clear to me that Whitcomb decided to write this book before a plea deal had ever even been reached. So if you're looking for when the 4D chess game actually started, it's going to be right around this time when they made sure all the players were in place before they went on this venture. And the book was a key factor in this venture, as we've discussed in the past. It gave Brian Koberger an outside source to be able to refer to when writing his post-conviction relief. Integral part. However, when you ask directly Christopher Whitcomb if he's part of this 4D chess game, instead of him saying, no, that's just silly, he becomes very defensive, and you can tell everything he's saying is everything but the truth.
Or what people are saying out there is that this was all part of some like bigger plan, so that Ann Taylor is then just, Sai's playing a part, Turvy's playing a part, you're playing a part, and then for
Playing a
Ann
part
Taylor
in
to
what?
die on her sword.
Playing a part in what?
And this whole little to get back into the courtroom, and that Ann Taylor is just going to die on her sword. Just thoughts on that.
Wait a minute. My book starts out saying this story begins at the end. The end is Brian Koberger pled guilty to 4 counts of murder and 1 count of felony burglary.
Hey, so here's just the basic things this isn't even any in-depth thing. This is just the basic things that you can look for when people are lying. So when people lie, their brain works on an overdrive to manage information, resulting in distinct linguistic shifts. So watch this. Okay, the last two are the most telling. Question repetition and defensive escalation. Striking back with offensive statements like, why are you attacking me? Question repetition.
And then for
Playing a
Ann
part
Taylor
in
to
what?
die on her sword.
Playing a part in what? What part would I have in anything? I don't say Brian Koberger didn't do it. What part would I play in anything? I just looked at the file. I reported on the file as a journalist.
I think it's ridiculous.
No, I'm curious. What part am I playing in anything? I'm curious. I don't know this. Do you think he would do anything that Ann Taylor asked him to do? And they've said, do you think they would even have a conversation? I mean, what plot could I or they have possibly? But I mean, it's absurd.
Now, I think you would agree that the whole thing was information dumping, providing excessive, irrelevant details to make a fabricated story more believable. He restated the questions back, question repetition. I think I counted 7 or 8 times, and he was very defensive as he did it, as he questioned, the even reason why she's asking the question. But if it was the only thing that I could point to. That I couldn't point to everything, but I can literally point to everything in the overall list. Overly formal language, dropping natural contradictions, like saying I did not instead of I didn't. He absolutely got very formal, and he started to choose to refer to people by their full names.
Oh my God, have you talked to Turvy? You think Turvy would do
That's
Dr.
wild.
Turvy?
I'm saying,
First of all, if
no,
you look
I
at Sai
know.
Ray and Dr. Turvy, based on what they, so I was going to go, Dr. Turvy was brave enough to open his mouth and say certain things. These people did not.
Now, this is my favorite: information dumping, providing excessive, irrelevant details to make a fabricated story feel more believable. Not once did he ever say, no, that is not the case. He never once even denied it. All he did was provide excessive, irrelevant details and then follow every other progression in a lying scenario.
Now they are. Now you've got the whole thing. You've got what I saw a year ago, right?
I agree. Yes.
I wrote about it. Now it's out. So you take those 16 people, among them is Dr. Turvy and among them is the other gentleman. You take all of those things and look at what they said, how they said it.
I am now even more convinced. Him, Turvy, Sai Ray, and Taylor, they're all working together, and it is a plan, and he just confirmed it for me. But if this was a plan of 4D chess with all parties involved, as I suggest, there would be a sequence of events, of things that would need to take place over this time period for it all to work out. And as I look at a timeline of events, it seems that everything is strategically happening one right after the other. You see, the sentencing for this case was July 23rd, 2025. From that date until January 3rd, 2026, we had some of the documents start to be released. Then out of nowhere on January 3rd, 2026, we have Bryan Kohberger's sister go to Mike Baker of the New York Times and begin to give an interview. Although the interview was very brief and not a lot was said, we can see the starting stages of something happening. I made the suggestion when this happened that Mike Baker would probably be willing to pay a big price for the inside story from the Kohberger family.
You had to think that something was cooking when Mike Baker from the New York Times interviewed Mel Kohberger.
And I believe that he probably did pay that big price, and it started on January 3rd, 2026. And other things lend me to believe that. And that price would be necessary for this plan, because the end goal of this plan is for different attorneys to take over this case. And those attorneys would probably need to be paid for some way.
What I would expect is if Hippler says, I'm going to grant it for you, let's start over. Great. Let's get a real death qualified attorney that actually has experience working in death penalty trials.
But as we follow this timeline, then we get to April 28, 2026, when the book Broken Plea was released to the public. Now, at that time, we had Christopher Whitcom, Brent Turvy begin to go on local podcasts. Yet it's been said by Brent Turvy that the Kohberger family literally had seen him on the Custody Queens podcast and reached out to him.
That's the case. I'll disclose something that I have not disclosed yet, which I think is important to know. And that is that after I did Queens of Custody and your podcast, the family reached out to me like, who the hell are you and what are you doing on this case? And why haven't we heard of all this stuff before? And then I immediately like, okay, well, let's talk. And then I handed them off to people who had legal minds, which I do not.
Now I ask you, is it more likely that Bryan Kohberger's family happened to be watching the Custody Queens, or is it more likely that the reason that Turvy actually went on the podcast for the Custody Queens is so that he could cite a reason to have been introduced to the Kohberger family? I'll let you decide. But we know that the PCR didn't get filed immediately after that. It was quite a while later. In fact, it was July 22nd, 2026, when Kohberger mails off his filing, making that his official date for filing post-conviction relief. I will note that that was 14 days, exactly 2 weeks, after all of the defense expert reports were released in this case. Very strategic, and also coincided with the Netflix series release. Everything seems to be working out just exactly on the dates it needs to work out.
And then he puts in the filing, and now we get this so it's like the last couple of weeks has been everything Kohberger. And to me, this has been just orchestrated by him.
He dropped that filing. He filed that petition for post-conviction relief. He timed that on purpose. You had to think that something was cooking when Mike Baker from the New York Times interviewed Mel Kohberger.
Yeah, I guess there was almost like if you're reading the tea leaves, so to speak, you could see where this was headed, but I missed it actually.
But I will point out something that is different than everything that has happened up until this point. Brian Kohberger could have filed his post-conviction relief and we would be exactly where we're at right now, except he did not do that. He filed his post-conviction relief and then did something that's never been done in this case. He reached out to none other than the same person who had interviewed his sister back in January, Mike Baker, and gave a formal statement declaring his innocence. Now, why would Kohberger go to that extra step? And I think it's two-pronged. Number one, the media buzz around this case, they knew in advance needed to be propped up. They need a lot of eyes on this case right now, whether good or bad, as we go into the post-conviction relief filings. But also, if Mike Baker, as I suspect, has paid for the inside story to the Kohberger family, including Brian Kohberger's story, then it would make all the sense in the world for him to be the one that Kohberger reached out to give that statement, because at this point, I imagine he basically owns the words of the Kohberger family. But also, the media presence in this case needed to get big at this time for everything to work out, which brings in the other two players in the case.
An evidentiary issue in which you can lay down Mr. Ray's conspiracy theory.
Now, when I think about Sai Ray and his role, first we have to think about why would he be involved in this? And I think Judge Hippler calling him a conspiracy theorist in court is more than enough to take somebody with a lot of pride like Sai Ray and turn him against everything in this case. And by against, I don't mean against the defense team, but against the system. I think he would have been more than willing to be a player in this due to that statement by Judge Hippler. To think that Sai Ray, throughout his long career, would sit back and take something like that and not get offended by it, I don't think is logical thinking. And then when we look at what he's saying in interviews, he contradicts everything that he put in his expert report. It is clear to me that if somebody that has been around that long is willing to go out and blatantly lie to the public in interviews, then that tells me that person is likely playing a part in this. And his part to me is very clear. It's to stir everybody up on the guilter side, but at the same time, admonish Turvy and Ann Taylor. and he does it over and over and over.
Brett Turvy gets with Whitcomb, who's another idiot. Like the guy who's never investigated a homicide is going to be the armchair quarterback that's going to change this thing, right? So Turvy and Whitcomb partner up. Turvy becomes very outspoken about this. And what does Ann Taylor do? She publicly reprimands him and issues this cease and desist. If you think about what Turvy's saying Brian Kohberger is innocent, that this is a big conspiracy, that there's other people. I mean, he goes as far as saying Dylan is potentially involved. How absolutely absurd. Yet Ann Taylor reprimands him from proclaiming BK's innocence. I come out with a book. I go around to law enforcement. Ann knows. I told her I was going to go teach law enforcement. I have been very, very clear. I've always thought Brian Kohberger is guilty. I think in 10 out of 10 courts in America convict this kid. Every single time we go to court, he gets convicted. The question is, does all the evidence come in because of some of the ways that the evidence was managed, which is a whole different conversation. The question is, does all the evidence come in because of some of the ways that the evidence was managed, which is a whole different conversation. We have the plea deal gets worked out within 72 hours. Ann Taylor stays on as Kohberger's attorney. Like this last year, she's the only person on the jail logs that was visiting him on a regular basis. He hasn't sought out new counsel.
So what does Sai Ray say over and over and over consistently? Kohberger's guilty. But the evidence, if it all comes in, the evidence, there was issues with the way they gathered the evidence. While he's calling guilty, he's actually pointing out reasons for evidence to not come in against Brian Kohberger. But he's very clear. Kohberger guilty, Turvy bad. But what should get everybody's eyebrows raised is over and over and over, he says, Ann Taylor bad, Kohberger bad, Turvy bad, Ann Taylor bad. That's going to be the common denominator between these two players.
For what is it, like a third, 20, 29, 30% of all of the people who are exonerated by the Innocence Project basically confessed and took a plea deal at the urgence of their defense attorney because they were frightened they were going to lose at trial. That's a third. That's not a joke. That's something we have to think about how our legal system works. It's the next step that has to happen in the process. You've done this before, I'm certain. And I don't know whether you ever worked with Innocence Networks before, but I have through my entire career. In fact, I started working with the Innocence Project. My first big case, high profile case, was the West Memphis case. And I worked directly with the Innocence Project out of Cardozo Law in that case. And the process and the metrics and the intake ability of a Innocence Project is dependent upon all the other appeals being denied or completed. Those processes completed. Again, 1/3 of defendants who are investigated by the Innocence Project are found to have been wrongfully convicted. And I don't know whether you ever worked with Innocence Networks before, but I have through my entire career. In fact,
now, when I think about the role that Turvy seems to be playing, it becomes really obvious to me, because why would a guy who is held in high regard in his field, a guy who seems to have a lot of integrity, why would he openly lie for no reason? And we know that he is lying in some aspects as he gives interviews. As I try to point out in the discrepancies between the two interviews, number one,
the version of Ann Taylor that I know bears no resemblance to the Ann Taylor that took the plea and is talking in public right now. I don't know this person at all. I don't recognize her at all.
Well, when you last met with her, you had no indication that the plea was gonna happen. And how did you actually find out about the plea? Through the media? I
found out from a colleague. The colleague texted me and said, "Hey Brent, I remember you were working on this case. I remember reading the articles. I remember this. I remember you mentioning it. What's going on? There's a plea agreement. Is that true?" And I wrote back immediately, "No way, no way. There's a plea."
And it comports with the meeting that Ann Taylor had with us, which caused me to get up and walk out, which is that she basically said I couldn't get him to take the plea initially. I couldn't get him to do it. So what did I do? I went and I enlisted his family.
When you last met with her, you had no indication that the plea was gonna happen. And how did you actually find out about the plea? Through the media?
I found out from a colleague.
And it comports with the meeting that Ann Taylor had with us, which caused me to get up and walk out.
When you last met with her,
and it comports with the meeting that Ann Taylor had with us, which caused me to get up and walk out.
But also the fact that this statement is factually false.
Now, I'll give you one other piece of information that I learned from the Koberger family. She hasn't spoken to him since the plea. So she's in court representing him without even talking to him.
And the reason I say that is the law actually mandates that the attorneys are in communication with the client during these type of proceedings. And we know since the plea deal that his defense team on 2 different occasions has litigated restitution issues as well as private matters related to the media literally trying to get all the defense's financial information unsealed to them, which is now in the appellate courts. And if the Koberger defense team had no communication with Koberger during any of this, then it would there would be serious ramifications to them. But then again, I do like to take everything that is said and put it under a microscope as it relates to the law. Let's say for just a moment that what Turvy's saying is true, that the defense team hasn't talked to Koberger since the plea. Guess what that would do, which I find interesting. If Taylor and her team had completely failed to speak to Koberger while executing these motions, it would constitute severe, structural, ineffective assistance of counsel, giving Koberger automatic grounds to immediately overturn his convictions and plea agreement. So while I believe what he's saying is blatantly false, if what he's saying is true, it would literally be grounds for an automatic overturn of Koberger's conviction, which lends me to believe it is quite possible. But if it happened, you can bet it happened on purpose. But in the end, when I look at what Turvy says about his history with the Innocence Project, that's why I call him the crusader in this, because I think he would be a willing participant to play this game if he knew that this game was necessary for justice to be served in this case. But when I hear his words and they point out over and over and over, Sai Ray bad and Ann Taylor bad, that's where I pay attention. Because when you look at the opposite ends of the pyramid, all are saying the same thing. Each other is bad, but they're both saying Ann Taylor bad. And they both want Ann Taylor on the stand in the post-conviction relief. And why is that? Because in the end, that is what's going to tell us if Pav is right in all this or if Pav is wrong. Not one word any of these people say between now and then will tell us if Pav is right or wrong. The only thing that will tell us if Pav is right or wrong is when Ann Taylor takes the stand in the post-conviction relief evidentiary hearing. And if she does not do what everybody thinks she will do, which is say that she was not at fault, and she does what I say she's going to do, and she's going to take responsibility and fall on the sword, that will be the day that Pav proves his theory, or that'll be the day that Pav's theory is proven wrong. Let me know your thoughts.